I embarked on a journey from Brooklyn to Vermont, making my way to my friend John's cabin for a snowboarding weekend. At that time, I owned two vehicles, a 2013 BMW 3 Series and a 2006 Ford F-150. On this particular night, I was driving the Ford F-150, which carried my snowboarding gear in its truck bed. The clock was nearing 10 p.m., and the roads were enveloped in darkness due to the late hour and heavy snowfall. There were no other cars in sight as I navigated my way to my friend's cabin, roughly 45 minutes away. Regrettably, my truck had a history of mechanical troubles, and this night was no exception. Just when I least anticipated it, on a remote and dimly lit road, the engine unexpectedly began to overheat, with the temperature gauge rapidly entering the red zone. I decreased my speed and pulled over to the side, waiting for the engine to cool down. After a while, I cautiously resumed driving, but even at a slow pace, the engine's temperature soared once more, compelling me to pull over and turn off the truck. Beneath the hood, I endeavored to diagnose the issue, but the combination of darkness and snow made it nearly impossible. I needed to reach out to John for assistance, but unfortunately, I had no cellular reception on that desolate road, leaving me feeling helpless and stranded. Opting to restart the truck, I took refuge inside, benefiting from the warmth it provided while idling. Astonishingly, the engine remained stable as I waited. Encouraged, I gave driving another attempt, only to confront the same overheating problem. Left with no alternative, I waited for about 10 minutes until a passing car came into view. With my hazard lights activated, I swung open the door and gestured to attract the attention of the passing vehicle. The driver, in a compact Toyota, kindly pulled over and rolled down their window. Thankful for the aid, I described my predicament and requested to use their phone. Luckily, they had a signal, suggesting they might be a local resident. I dialed John's number, and he answered. I elucidated the situation and sought his advice. John directed me to contact a specific nearby towing company and reassured me that he would come to retrieve me. Sharing my exact location, he confirmed his imminent arrival. Subsequently, I contacted the recommended towing company and sought their assistance. Throughout these conversations, the Toyota driver attentively observed my actions. Trying not to focus on their presence, I returned their phone and expressed my gratitude. They responded with a simple "you're welcome" and promptly raised their window before departing into the snowy obscurity. I watched as their taillights gradually faded away, disappearing below the peak of the hilly road. Once more, I found myself alone. Returning to my idling truck, I sought solace in its warmth. Curiosity compelled me to momentarily switch off the headlights to gauge the extent of the darkness outside. The lack of visibility was staggering, with profound blackness extending as far as the eye could discern. I resigned myself to waiting, unable to engage in any activities reliant on an internet connection. I spent the time playing games on my phone for roughly 20 minutes until an abrupt thud echoed against my passenger side window. Startled, I redirected my focus to the window. The darkness made it challenging to discern the figure outside, and the truck's headlights provided limited illumination. A man's voice implored for help, urgently requesting me to open the door as he was freezing. He struggled to force the door open, but found it locked. I directed my flashlight towards the window, which slightly aided in revealing his features. All I could make out was that he wore an oversized black coat with the hood drawn over his head. In response, I shouted back, inquiring about his situation. The enigmatic man outside claimed to be lost and stranded, desperate to escape the cold. A sense of unease enveloped me, and I anxiously pondered how to verify his intentions and ensure my safety. Before I could devise a plan, his demeanor became more aggressive as he relentlessly pounded on the locked door and intensified his cries for assistance. Relying on my instincts in that tense moment, I shifted the truck into drive. Understanding my intentions, he redoubled his efforts to break the window by pounding even harder. I accelerated onto the road, reaching a speed of 30 miles per hour despite the potential harm to the already overheated engine. However, the sight that greeted me next caught me off guard, causing my heart to skip a beat. As I ascended a hill on the road, I glimpsed the glimmer of taillights approaching from the side of the road. Upon passing the stationary car, I recognized it as the same Toyota from earlier, the vehicle driven by the person who had offered help. I decelerated, rolled down the window, and peered inside, yet the driver was nowhere to be seen. The car appeared vacant. Casting my gaze beyond the vehicle, I spotted footprints in the snow, illuminated by my taillights, indicating that the individual pounding on my window was none other than the Toyota driver. He had attempted to deceive me into unlocking the door, leaving his true motives shrouded in uncertainty. Continuing on my journey, well aware of the damage I was causing to the engine, I pulled over a few minutes later upon noticing headlights approaching from the opposite direction. Overjoyed, I recognized it as the tow truck I had been eagerly anticipating. I flashed my lights, and the driver pulled over. I recounted the recent encounter, to which he humorously remarked that he had arrived at the opportune moment. He inquired if the man had been armed, but I couldn't provide a definitive answer due to the limited visibility. Urgently, he proposed that we expedite the towing process. The tow truck driver spent around 15 minutes attaching my truck and preparing it for towing. During this period, the Toyota never passed us, leading me to believe that the driver had reversed course and chosen an alternate route, possibly out of concern for being identified. Using the tow truck driver's phone, I contacted John once more and informed him of our rendezvous at the body shop. In brief, John and I relished our snowboarding weekend, and the body shop replaced the faulty water pump in my truck, resolving the overheating problem. A few weeks later, I sold the truck. Reflecting on the situation, I'm thankful that I heeded my instincts and refrained from lowering my window or unlocking the doors, as it could have resulted in a perilous circumstance. In that remote environment, I might have become a victim of a sinister scheme, with the perpetrator's identity remaining forever concealed. At the age of 17, I entered my first romantic relationship. During this time, I was residing with my mother due to my parents' divorce when I was 11 years old. Summoning my courage, I asked my girlfriend out for a date, which she eagerly accepted. Both of us were employed. I worked at a local grocery store, while she was employed at Starbucks. Since we were both in our final year of high school and had day shifts, I chose a Friday for our date, foreseeing that it would leave us with minimal homework to handle. After our work shifts concluded, I picked up my girlfriend from her residence. Our financial constraints led us to choose a modest restaurant near my place for our evening meal. The enjoyment of our meal was followed by a visit to her house to share some quality moments together. By the time we arrived at her home, darkness had fallen. My girlfriend expressed a degree of disappointment about the brevity of our date, but I explained my financial limitations prevented us from exploring other paid options. Ultimately, we agreed to embark on a nighttime drive. Our route took us through town, eventually leading to an isolated road within a wooded area. As the paved road gave way to a dirt path, an unexpected urge to use the restroom struck both of us. We pulled over, stepping out of the car. Strangely, upon exiting the vehicle, we were assaulted by an incredibly unpleasant and unidentifiable odor. Although I dismissed it as possibly emanating from someone else nearby, my girlfriend was so repulsed that she experienced a physical reaction. Swiftly completing our errand, we planned to return to the car. During our return, a noise from our left side, resembling the snapping of a twig, startled us. Fearing it might be some sort of wildlife, we hastened back to the car. However, just as I was about to open the car door, a chilling scream of fear or agony pierced the air from the direction we had recently come. Reassuring my girlfriend, I requested that she remain in the car while I investigated. Though hesitant, she consented, and I secured the doors to ensure her safety. Walking toward the source of the noise, I heard the scream again, now much closer. Overwhelmed by fear, I abandoned my intent to proceed further. Instead, I grabbed my phone, activated the flashlight, and quickly snapped a photograph. The ensuing flash unveiled an eerie scene. A man in a white shirt adorned with black stripes, clutching a blue tarp before him. He stood perfectly still. Without hesitation, I raced back to the car, unlocked the doors, and sped away. Understandably anxious, my girlfriend questioned me about the incident. She could discern the unease on my face, but I promised to share the details later. Returning to a less unsettling area of town, we made our way back to her house. Inside her room, I recounted my encounter with the mysterious man and displayed the photograph I had captured. The sight profoundly unnerved both of us. Given the circumstances and our shared discomfort, she generously allowed me to spend the night. Thankfully, it being a Friday, we had no work or school obligations the following day. Undoubtedly, that encounter stands as the most terrifying experience of my life. Although our romantic relationship has since transformed, our bond as best friends remains strong. I am now 23 years old, while she is 22. During the late summer of 2011, when I was almost 19 years old, I spent time with my younger best friend in a rural area of southwestern Virginia, just about 15 minutes away from Mount Airy, North Carolina. In our small town, most places closed by 10 p.m., leaving us to find our own ways to entertain ourselves. Fortunately, this was never a problem for us, as we were always adept at finding ways to have a good time. The evening kicked off innocently, with a visit to the mall and a leisurely drive around the streets in search of girls, the typical pursuits for teenage guys. When our endeavours yielded no results, we opted for a round of bowling until the closing hour. After that, around midnight, we ambled along Main Street, exploring hidden paths and playing at being rebellious. Despite the late hour, we felt safe as the area had a reputation for low crime rates. As our walk became tiring, we decided to grab a late-night meal at the nearest Waffle House. Following that, we made a brief stop at Walmart, yet our thirst for adventure remained unquenched. Consequently, we embarked on a drive along some secluded backcountry roads, a well-known pastime for us. These roads offered an opportunity for us to create our own fun, particularly because they were often deserted during those hours. The road we were traversing was one I had only driven on once before during daylight. Although it wasn't far from either of our homes, there was no reason to take that route while still in Carolina. Upon crossing into Virginia, the road transitioned from paved to dirt, much like many others in the vicinity. This specific road received minimal maintenance due to its remote location and sparse residences. Navigating it safely required us to slow down considerably, especially considering that heavy rains frequently caused the road to erode. Despite our caution, it felt like any other road we had driven on, even at such a late hour with little traffic. The road mainly wound through wooded areas and nestled at the base of a small mountain. The houses were easily missed during the night. We might have overlooked them entirely if we hadn't caught sight of a light out of the corner of our eyes. This piqued our curiosity, and we both turned to see a man standing beneath a porch light. While we couldn't make out his features, we noticed he was observing us intently, his head tracking our movements. This observation made us uncomfortable, yet we tried not to dwell on it, assuming he had stepped outside for smoke. It was his overall demeanour that left us unsettled. However, this unsettling encounter marked just the beginning. Gradually, we picked up our pace, our unease growing as we discussed the enigmatic man. Within minutes, we reached the end of the road and returned to the familiar paved surface, a road I frequented weekly. Taking a right turn, we felt a sense of relief, able to accelerate and leave our thoughts of the man behind. The road offered picturesque vistas of the town below as it traced the ridge of a small mountain. After a couple of miles, we arrived at the end of that road and turned right again, heading back toward my house. This road was more densely wooded than the previous one, but I was even more acquainted with it, having travelled it countless times. As we approached the main highway, we spotted something ahead in the distance illuminated by my headlights. Given the prevalence of deer in the area, we assumed it was an animal crossing the road and decelerated. However, as we drew closer, we realized it wasn't an animal, but a figure hunched over and walking in the left lane, against traffic as they should. Perplexed, we exchanged glances, wondering why someone would be out walking at such an hour. Upon closer examination, we identified an older woman with long, unkempt grey hair, wearing a white t-shirt and pants. She remained facing away from us until we were about 50 feet away, at which point she turned to face us. It was then that we got a clear view of her face. It's hard to pinpoint her age exactly, but she seemed to be in her mid-40s to late 50s, her worn appearance making it difficult to determine. Dark bags lingered heavily under her deeply set eyes. Her greasy hair and weathered skin suggested a possible influence of drugs, although we couldn't be certain. However, the most disturbing aspect was the sight of dried blood splattered on her attire, with a large knife gripped in her hand. Uncertain of her intentions, our inclination to be rebellious vanished instantly. We instinctively pressed down on the accelerator and only eased up once we reached the highway. We were gripped by terror throughout the entire ordeal, and what should have been a 5-minute drive to my house transformed into a 35-minute detour, fueled by an irrational fear that she might somehow follow us. In close-knit communities like ours, everyone knew each other, yet neither of us had ever encountered this woman before, nor did we ever come across her again. We closely monitored local news for any reports of a blood-stained woman being apprehended, but nothing ever surfaced. I still can't fathom any plausible explanation for why she would be wandering the backcountry roads at nearly 4 in the morning, in such a dishevelled state, covered in blood, and clutching a knife. Given the risks of encountering both humans and animals, it was an utterly alarming situation. Fast forward to the present day. I now reside with my wife on that serene road along the mountain ridge, positioned between the two roads where these unsettling incidents transpired. I often take the latter road as part of my daily routine and haven't encountered any trace of that peculiar woman since. Earlier this year, a significant drug and cockfighting operation was exposed down the road from the house where the man had observed us. While I can't definitively establish whether it was the same house or if those individuals were living in the area at the time, I have often wondered, in light of everything that unfolded, if the man was indeed keeping watch over that property. As for the woman, I sincerely hope our paths never cross again.